Hello, my name is JMcCune, and I am here to present my book talk to you, which relates to my genre study on the Revolutionary War. Um, I chose a book that relates to the people, which is kind of one of the groups of books that I found within my genre study. The book title is Those Rebels, John and Tom. The book is by Barbara Kerley. Barbara Kerley is an award-winning author of several picture books, including a Caldecott Honor and ALA Notable Book, The Dinosaurs of Waterhouse Hawkins. Also a Siebert Honor for Walt Whitman, Words for America. So she is a notable author of several very well-known picture books. I really enjoyed this book because it presents the characters in a very thorough, kind of whimsical way. Also, it incorporates the history very well, and it takes them through, the stories of the war that were going on, um, encompassed within these men's lives. So I wanted to share just a little bit with you about the book. If you'll notice, the illustrations are more cartoon-like, which I liked, which because it's good and pleasing to young kids. I think it's very attractive to them. Um, as we get into the book, now the book, of course, I found was published in 2012, which is good because it's a current book. So, and I'm sure it is a well-researched book. First of all, I read through this page and I feel like it kind of catches the attention. It says, the true story, that off, the true story of how one gentleman, short and stout, and another, tall and lean, formed a surprising alliance, committed treason, and helped launch a new nation. So it kind of helps you see that they're very different people, but then they ended up overcoming their differences and coming together for a very, very important reason. And then, of course, as you move through the book, it starts out in their childhood, presenting them as young babies, and presents their differences. Starts right off the bat presenting, what they were like as children and how different, very different they were. And as they grew up, how different they were. All through the very beginnings of the book, it explains, like I said, how different these men were. And one good thing I think about that is that it really is. These two men's lives were really a representation of the times then, because you have John Adams, who he did not have slaves. He was a hard worker, very different. He was a lawyer. He was very kind of boisterous and outspoken, but he believed, in working his own land and, working for himself, and he did not believe in the acts of slavery. Whereas, on the other hand, you have Thomas Jefferson, who, built a huge plantation. He owned slaves all his life, and, he believed in kind of that type of lifestyle. So it really does present, the two really totally different groups of people we had in existence, and why there was this, somewhat of a conflict that had to be overcome within the colonies before even coming together to fight for independence, which I thought was a good historical connection. And then you move on, and it starts presenting that even though they were very different men, they had two very important things in common, and one was, of course, that they cared about America, and the colonies deeply cared about America because it had become their home, and they had been here for the majority of their lives, and they had established themselves and their livelihood within the colonies. But they both cared deeply about America, and then they, of course, did not care at all for King George. They called him a tyrant. They both agreed that he was very much a tyrant. And I really like the way the illustrations, depict the colonies. They depict, the king, of course, in our perspective, collecting the taxes. And it goes into how that the king affected both of their lifestyles in different ways, but he affected both of their lifestyles in the colonies negatively. So it wasn't that one lifestyle, Thomas Jefferson, who owned slaves and had this huge plantation, was affected in a positive way, or that John Adams, a hard independent worker who did not, believe in slavery and worked to, build his own economic prosperity. The king affected both of them in a very, very, very negative way. So that, of course, was the big reason, one of the big reasons why they ended up coming together. So, of course, it has the illustrations, which I really love, because they do put kind of a comical spin on things. Of course, it gets into the taxes of the time, and, of course, presents King George as a very greedy fellow. And it goes on, and it starts getting into, of course, the men coming in to meet in Congress, meet together, kind of what was going on in the colonies and in their lives at the time, and them starting to come together and meet in Continental Congress, and how they got along during Continental Congress. And what their differences were. How Thomas Jefferson was very quiet, and he kind of stood aside, and John Adams was very, very, very outspoken and very argumentative when it came to, the topic of freeing the colonies. And he, of course, I think stood by and wondered how could Thomas Jefferson be so, so passionate about this if he was so quiet and he had nothing to say. Which of course goes on to them getting to know each other better. And they all realize that Tom is very quiet, as far as verbally quiet, but when it comes to putting his words on paper, he is very, very, very loud. So that is where they find his strength. And so, of course, finding and learning the strengths in each other, they come together and they start working together. And they create an alliance which is stronger than any other. So they come together and, of course, make decisions about declaring independence and getting the colonies ready for war. All right, and it is decided that Thomas Jefferson, of course, will put his mighty words on paper so that the nation can declare independence. And of course they do. They declare independence. Thomas Jefferson, of course, it goes into how he toils for days about writing the Declaration of Independence. And of course, at the same time, while Thomas Jefferson sits quietly in his boarding house writing the Declaration of Independence, John is, of course, rallying the Congress and leading the vote and making sure that all of the representatives from the colonies vote yay in favor of freedom and independence, which is very important. They have to vote yay in order to agree to want to go to war against the king. And then you may move on, and of course it even goes into the toil and drudgery of editing the Declaration of Independence, and how, of course, Thomas Jefferson, he had put so many hours into developing and building this long document, and then the Congress narrows it down to only one page. So, and finally, of course, they agree. They vote yay for the Declaration of Independence. It is sent to the king. They declare their independence, and of course, we have Independence Day, which is a wonderful day, which we have just celebrated, and we are all so thankful that we have it. And then as you move on, it gets into, the signing of the Declaration of Independence with the rebels, John and Tom. And of course, the last part of this book, which I thought was quite interesting, tells about the true history of John and Tom's friendship after this time in history, and how they went on to remain friends throughout, the building of our new nation, and so on and so forth. And they continue to carry on this great alliance. I wanted to read this last little paragraph, which kind of gives you the kind of the end, which is kind of the spoiling part of it. Maybe I should tell you to read the book yourself, but you might not. I don't know. So I wanted to go ahead and read it to you because this, I just thought this was a really neat thing. Maybe it's just me, but it says, by the beginning of July 1826, John, now 90 years old, and Tom, now 83, were both very ill. On July 3rd, Tom, in his sickbed at Monticello, awoke from a coma, thinking it the 4th. His family replied that it would be soon, almost 500 miles away. 500 miles away in Braintree, John also drifted in and out of consciousness. So they were both on their deathbed. And it is July 4th, Independence Day, in 1826, which is, of course, many years later. They're both living apart, 500 miles away. John and Tom both lived through the night, dying just a few hours apart on July 4th, 1826, America's 50th birthday. When told it was the 4th, John had replied, "It is a great day. It is a good day." And I will end it there, because it is. It's a good day.